Welcome to episode 18 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes and is brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel and Will. Let's get started with my first topic, and I want to cover the CBRS PAL auction. So this started in July, it just recently ended, and over $4.6 billion were raised. And to remind everyone, this is the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum. They call it sort of the magic band. And this is through the CBRS on-go scenario with shared, it's a shared spectrum allocation system. And what's interesting is that, now others are able to have access to licensed spectrum beyond just a typical operator. So there were cable companies, there were internet service providers, there were enterprises, there were schools, there were municipalities that bid on this. I think it was successful, by judging, just by the number of participants. There were over 22,000 licenses available and nearly 20,000 were sold. Although I'm a little disappointed, Chairman Pai and the FCC, said it was a great success. It's going to help accelerate 5G, but, the federal government put another $4.5 billion in the coffers. And I don't know about you, Anshel, but I think there needs, especially with this, this auction, there should have been some sort of ceilings, because it's one thing to buy spectrum. Obviously, spectrum is expensive, but it's another thing to actually invest in the infrastructure to deploy it. So what are your thoughts?
I think we're still kind of getting details on who acquired what in terms of what they got. Yeah. I saw that there were some rumblings that Verizon got about 40 megahertz. And I think 40 megahertz is good, but it's not enough. And I think we'll find out who else acquired 3.5, because I think it's still kind of secret when it closes, it's still secret. And then slowly the licenses come out. But I feel like there needs to be more spectrum, which is why I think it's good that this is not the only auction. But I also think that because this is not the only auction, bidding hasn't been as aggressive as it could have been.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think, whoever is doing bidding is maybe holding back, because I know there's more spectrum to acquire, and they don't need to, blow all their spending on one auction. Yeah. But that said, I really do think these mid-band auctions are very important, because there's a lot of capacity that can be gained through mid-band, and a lot of bandwidth that can be gained in places other than, these millimeter wave hotspots.
Yeah, and I'll caveat the fact that, PAL is a part of the CBRS. There's general access licenses as well. And so there's flexibility built into the model. I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see kind of as things progress, who the winners were. But it's a step in the right direction. And, from my perspective, I just think, the FCC stating that it's a success because, they put $4.5 billion in the treasury. I don't kind of quantify that as a success. I think what's a success is, leveling the playing field and providing affordable access to spectrum, licensed spectrum, to operators that are, for example, providing service in rural, because that's been a big gap. And obviously it was something that was discussed when the T-Mobile and Sprint merger came together. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of go forward there. Let's jump to your first topic. You want to talk about Qualcomm and Ericsson and some interoperability testing.
Yeah, so this week, Qualcomm and Ericsson announced that they had completed 5G standalone carrier aggregation interoperability testing, and at the 2.5 gigahertz band, combining multiple 2.5 gigahertz bands together, but also that they were able to achieve 2.5 gigabits per second of a download speed over midband. So they're able to aggregate 2 different blocks of midband, which is what we're kind of discussing right now, and being able to aggregate that, 2 different chunks of bandwidth together in a way that makes it almost fiber-like in terms of bandwidth. Obviously, this is peak throughput, so this is the best possible, best case scenario. But I think it's a really big deal because it also allows for more than just mid-band aggregation. you can aggregate a low band with a mid band, or a low band with a mid band and with a high band. So you could have that true 5G 3-layer cake of low, mid, high, where you get the coverage, you get the bandwidth and the capacity, and then you get the speed where it's available. So, you know, this is the next important step to enabling, you know, the true 5G that people are expecting and have been promised.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you know, standalone core, you know, carrier aggregation are all important. Maybe for some of our listeners and viewers that don't understand what carrier aggregation is, can you take a second and kind of define that for people?
Sure. So what you're doing with carrier aggregation is you're basically taking different blocks of spectrum that are available to you that are not congruous or not in the same continuous band, and basically are connecting them together and aggregating their spectrum or their bandwidth together at the same time and connecting to those different frequencies simultaneously so that you can connect the bandwidth together and utilize it as one massive piece. And that's actually how, you know, we got accelerated speeds in 3G with HSPA plus.
Right.
And then it became a DC HSPA plus, which was dual carrier. So carrier aggregation has been around since, you know, the 3G, 4G days. I think I said 3G, but I meant 4G. But, you know, the early, no, actually, I think DC HSPA, yeah, that was 3G. So DC HSPA plus, remember, was kind of being touted as 4G and until we actually got LTE. So carrier aggregation's been around for a while, but carrier aggregation is what made 4G way faster than 3G. And it's going to be what makes 5G way faster than 4G.
Yeah, good stuff, good technology. Well, let's shift to my second topic this week, and British Telecom. So they're in the news. They're readying what they expect to be a possible takeover. Their stock hit a 10-year low, and their market cap came pretty close to 10 billion pounds, which is about half of its supposed value. And obviously BT, they're not just in mobile. They have lots of other business services and wireline and that sort of thing as well. But I think this really points to one of my criticisms of a lot of UK operators is that with the deployment of 5G, they've been very focused on access. Just you think of VO2s of the world and others, and I think this might be somewhat, it's not a direct correlation, but somewhat of an indication of BT needs to be focused on driving use case and not access. I mean, what do you have any thoughts?
Well, to be honest with you, I think big problem with BT is that they're a legacy operator. You know, they've been around for a very long time.
Yeah,
and they're a very old way of doing things, and that's kind of been the criticism of them for a long time. And I don't really feel like they've changed much, even though they did acquire a competitor. I forget which one it was. Was it EE? I think they bought EE,
it's
right?
EE. It's EE.
Yeah, so they bought EE. I remember because I was using EE SIM when I was in the UK last, and I just feel like EE was a much more innovative carrier, and they kind of like gobbled them up and then didn't really adopt a lot of their creative strategies. And as a result, they kind of ruined both companies. And that's why their market cap is where it is today. And that's why I think that they're such a, they're an attractive target right now because, they're a consolidated entity already. They have a lot of customers and you gain a lot of pops just by buying them. And, if their value really is as low as, what is it, $20 billion, $15 billion, somewhere in there?
It's 10
billion pounds.
10 billion pounds, yeah.
Yeah, so 10 billion pounds is, a lot lower than it was. They were like at 50 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So I just don't think that their current situation makes much sense in the sense that like they have a lot of like hard infrastructure and they have a lot of assets, but I feel like they thought because they bought EE they were in the clear in terms of competitors, but I think they forgot that they have a lot of competitors outside the country that could buy them and turn them into a UK entity. But it sounds like they're trying to fight it off. But yeah, I have lots of thoughts about, the situation, but the reality is, I don't live there, so I don't think I have as much, insight
Right.
into the situation with BT, but I know a lot of people are frustrated with their service.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you don't deliver, I mean, that equates to subscriber churn and, and overall stock price. So I'll keep my eyes on them. I keep close tabs on the European market. We certainly don't want to cast them out with the bathwater, but it looks like things are pretty trying right now for them. But we'll keep an eye on that. Let's shift to your second topic, and I caught this as well, and I actually tweeted something about it today, but OpenSignal, basically, I believe they published a report, right? And they kind of led, it was sort of clickbait, I thought, on the title. They sort of led with, hey, the U.S. is behind on 5G speeds. So
Right.
what's the color on all that?
So, I mean, there's a graph, right? There's a graph that they kind of publish that everybody is sharing. And
Mm-hmm.
the graph basically shows, actually, I'll include the graph in the video podcast if you want to see it.
Yeah.
Um, but basically, the graph shows, the US in last place compared to Saudi Arabia and Korea, who are in first place, where you have, a comparison of 5G speeds versus 4G speeds. The 5G speed is the yellow bar, and the 4G speeds is a blue bar. And then you have each country ranked on how much faster their 5G is compared to their 4G.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that metric, Saudi Arabia is in first place because they've got a 14x improvement, and they also have the fastest average download speeds as well at
Yeah.
400 megabits per second. South Korea is down at 300,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because just 2 weeks ago, we did a podcast where the Korean government said their average speeds are 600 or
Yeah.
700. So
Right. Right.
there's a little bit of a disparity here between what OpenSignal is reporting and what, a government official, wireless or, entity has reported. So I would say that we should take some of these numbers with a grain of salt, both from the Korean government as well as from OpenSignal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What I would say is that, it shows US basically in dead last out of the countries that they have on this chart. With the Netherlands, Germany, UK, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Kuwait, Canada, Taiwan, Australia, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia all ahead of us. But one thing to consider is none of those countries on that list are remotely anywhere the size of the United States or
No.
have remotely as many people. So,
Right.
a good example is Canada is huge, but geographically, most of the people live in a very small area. Same with
Exactly.
Australia. Hong
Yeah.
Kong is basically a bunch of islands.
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan is an island. UK is pretty big, but still relatively small to the US. Germany would arguably be the largest, but guess what? Germany is the closest to the US. So
Right.
I think these comparisons need to take into consideration a lot of things.
Right.
But I still think it's too early to really give an assessment of what the state of 5G is in these countries, especially when you consider that AT&T and Verizon are still really rolling out their 5G networks.
Right.
And I think that we'll have a much better picture of what the landscape looks like by the end of the year, especially as T-Mobile also rolls out their 2.5 spectrum.
Right.
So I think we're very early, and OpenSignal is based on what's available.
Right.
So you have to install the app, you got to run it on your phone, and that's how they gather their data.
Yep.
So it's a complicated topic. There's a lot of nuance involved. I think it's a snapshot in time, but this can be used as a tool to convince people that we are behind, and in a meaningful manner. But at the same time, we are a much larger country with a lot more people, and each of our carriers has 100 million people. And if you notice, China's not on this list because I'm not sure even OpenSignal works in China. But
Right.
it's just something to consider.
Yeah, I know, I agree, and, I kind of read through the report, and it seemed to me that, they were focused on, the low band deployment in the US. And as we all know, low band, you're not going to get, the same performance, that you're going to get with, ideally mid band or
Right.
even
And
millimeter wave.
mid-band is mostly what's available right now, right? In terms of
Yeah.
where you can get 5G and what speeds you can get, that's pretty much all you can get right now because T-Mobile's, nationwide, they're the only ones with nationwide 5G, and truly nationwide. And the other thing is, yeah, all these other countries are using lots of mid-band. So that,
Yeah.
this once again reiterates the need for us to have more mid-band available.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Cool. Well, let's shift to my third and final topic this week. And I spoke with Sue Merrick. She writes for Fierce Wireless, and we talked about Dish. And Dish is teasing this notion of dynamic pricing for 5G. And I think their CEO, Charlie, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, is
Ergen?
Ergen. I think he alluded to this several months ago as well, but it's the whole notion is sort of like it's based on capacity, sort of like ride sharing and surge and that sort of thing. And so pricing could fluctuate, based on availability and use. And it's interesting, but I think there are other tools in their toolbox, such as deploying a standalone network, deploying network slicing to monetize, guaranteed quality of service for low latency and high throughput. Does this sound gimmicky to you? It sounds a little gimmicky to me.
I think they're going to still do all the things you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think they're going to do network slicing. I think they're going to, have all of the tools in their quiver available to them. But I think they're going to do this because they want to minimize the amount of infrastructure investment they need to make.
Sure.
Because the reality is, every operator in the world would have way better speeds if you could just give them unlimited fiber drops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you could give them unlimited switches and an unlimited bandwidth. But
Yeah.
there's a cap to what everyone can afford based on what their subscriber base is. So I think by utilizing more subscribers, on less spectrum and less infrastructure, by deploying this kind of a model, I think what it allows them to do is to charge less for the
Mm-hmm.
service up front. So they can charge, in theory, something like $15 a month or $10 a month, something ridiculously low. And with a caveat that you may have to pay dynamic pricing for this, but you have access to 5G for $10 a month. So, obviously we haven't discussed what the real pricing will be, but in theory, I think they're trying to break the mold of what service costs today. And maybe they could charge $20 a month and then do that.
Yeah. And it's a way for them to be differentiated. I've been on record, and we both contribute to Forbes on quite a frequent basis, and I've stated that they're going to have to be differentiated. They can't go head to head with Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T and be successful. IoT could be an area for them. This could be interesting, but you mentioned service, and I like to caveat that by it's access service, and it's not a discrete 5G service like low latency mobile gaming or anything like that. So I think, they need to be differentiated, but at the same time, they need to add value, and it's going to be just more than, what you pay for your 5G service. But it'll be interesting to see how things unfold. Let's move to your third topic this week, and you want to talk about Verizon and NASCAR. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah. So basically, what it is that a lot of spectator sports are having issues right now with having spectators.
Yeah, I wonder why. I'm missing baseball, by the way. I know you're missing your Padres. I'm missing my Astros.
I'm actually watching, more games online.
Yeah.
But basically, what I saw was happening is that they're gonna, basically set up like a 360 camera on the infield over 5G, so that you can watch a really high quality stream of the race from the spectator's perspective.
Oh, wow.
My understanding is right now they're just talking about the infield.
Okay.
But I have a feeling that, if this continues, we could in theory see, these camera setups in multiple places, so you can, switch around from the perspectives you want to see, as opposed to just watching whatever the broadcast stream is. It's a little bit on the gimmicky side, but I think it's still something that can improve the fan experience, especially considering that people can't really be there.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And, I've attended professional golfing tournaments. I lived in Houston for a number of years, and the Shell Open was there. And I actually had a chance to go to the Masters several years ago. It was quite a treat. And the thing that I noticed was, they use these really high definition cameras. It's the cabling that they have to run. And it looks like spaghetti, and it's huge, and you can trip over it. And what I think is compelling about what, Verizon is doing with NASCAR is that you can take these cameras. You don't need to have cables connected to them because it's a 5G connection, and you can put them anywhere. I mean, you can have them on a drone flying above, the racetrack, or you can place them in different parts of the venue there. And I think you're going to see this in all sports. We talked about baseball a second ago, but football, you name it, soccer.
It also helps that they already have a partnership that they established earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
So they were kind of already laying the groundwork for this. So
Yeah.
I think this will probably continue forward as things, as the year goes on. But I think there might be opportunities for this to occur, even as fans are allowed to come back, because it will just improve, the total fan experience.
Yeah, no, I know. And, and Verizon has a relationship at the Seattle Seahawks and Mariners stadium, CenturyLink Field. And I actually visited that facility last year, or a year and a half ago, and got a grand tour and got to see the technology in play. But there was, I believe it was Ericsson. It was pre-NR 5G equipment, but I was able to see it in, certain areas and talk to the general manager that's in charge of technology about, what their plans were, for 5G and, mixed reality and the ability to to be able to have, maybe pay an extra $5 when you walk in and then have, your smartphone be able to access all of these 5G connected cameras for exactly what you described. So I think 5G is going to make the stadium, and sporting and concert experience really exciting. Intel has done a lot of work establishing what they call a smart stadium blueprint or platform for 5G. And I think Intel's really helped sort of advance that. So super exciting stuff. So, well, great. Well, another great podcast this week. Anshel, why don't you wrap it up and take us home?
Absolutely. We hope that our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide us with a specific topic on 5G that they would like for us to cover in a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sog on Twitter. So please, we hope that you have a great weekend and tune again next week.